The security cameras in the abandoned Westfield shopping center show me walking the corridors every night at 2:17 a.m., but I've never been inside this building in my life. I'm an urban explorer who documents forgotten places like empty factories, closed hospitals, and defunct shopping centers. Over 3 years, I've built a reputation for finding interesting locations and capturing photographs that tell stories of these abandoned spaces. The Westfield Shopping Center closed in 2019 after years of declining foot traffic, leaving behind a massive empty structure that sits like a concrete monument to consumer culture's decline. I'd planned to explore it for months, researching its history, studying floor plans, and determining safe entry points. The mall opened in 1987 with over 150 stores, a food court, and anchor departments that drew customers from 3 counties, but gradually lost tenants to online shopping and newer developments. My interest in exploring the space was purely professional. I wanted to document how nature and time reclaim these artificial environments, photographing the slow transformation from commercial hub to modern ruin. But before I could organize an actual visit, something impossible started happening that made me question my understanding of both urban exploration and my own identity. 3 weeks ago, I received an anonymous email containing security footage from inside the abandoned mall, showing a figure who looked exactly like me, walking through the empty corridors in the middle of the night. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday when I had a clear alibi. I was at home grading papers for the night classes I teach at the community college, with my roommate present to confirm my whereabouts. The footage quality was surprisingly clear for an abandoned building, showing someone wearing my distinctive red jacket and carrying the same type of camera equipment I use for documentation projects. Even more unsettling was that this figure moved through the mall with obvious familiarity, navigating directly to specific locations without hesitation, as if following a well-established route. I initially assumed someone was playing an elaborate prank, possibly using deepfake technology or hiring an actor who resembled me, but the level of detail in the impersonation seemed impossible to fake. The person in the footage had my exact posture, walking style, and even the way I typically hold my camera when preparing to take photographs. When I enhanced the video using editing software, I could see facial features that matched mine down to small details, like the scar on my chin from a childhood accident, and the way my hair falls across my forehead. I decided to investigate by contacting the building's management company, hoping to learn more about their security system and determine whether this footage was authentic. According to the property manager, the mall's security cameras had been disconnected 2 years ago as a cost-saving measure, and the building was only checked monthly by a caretaker who confirmed the structure remained secure and undamaged. She seemed genuinely confused when I described the footage, insisting that no surveillance equipment was currently operational, and suggested that someone might be using the building illegally for filming projects without permission. Her reaction convinced me that either she was lying about the security system or something much stranger was occurring at this location. The second email arrived exactly 1 week later, containing additional footage from the same night, but showing events that supposedly occurred after the first video ended. This time, the figure who looked like me was examining specific storefronts with intense interest, particularly a former electronics store and a closed bookshop, taking detailed photographs of areas that seemed completely unremarkable in their current empty state. What made this footage even more disturbing was that I recognized several of the camera angles and composition techniques as matching my own photographic style, as if someone had studied my work extensively and was deliberately mimicking my approach to documenting abandoned spaces. The metadata embedded in the video files showed they were created using the same camera model I own, with settings and timestamp formats identical to my own equipment configuration. If you've been involved in urban exploration and noticed unexplained footage of yourself in locations you've never visited, please like this video and subscribe. I'm starting to think this phenomenon might be affecting other explorers in our community, and we need to document these incidents before they escalate into something more dangerous. I started researching the mall's history more, thoroughly looking for any unusual incidents or unexplained phenomena that might explain what I was experiencing. What I discovered was deeply unsettling. Between 2020 and 2022, 6 urban explorers posted about strange experiences at Westfield. including encounters with other explorers who knew their personal details despite being strangers. Several found their own photography equipment inside the mall that they'd never left behind. One photographer named Marcus discovered a memory card containing hundreds of images from his perspective, showing explorations he had no memory of conducting. Another explorer found detailed floor plans annotated in her own handwriting, despite never entering the building. These accounts were scattered across different forums, suggesting people weren't connecting their experiences to a broader pattern. I decided to visit the mall in person, hoping to solve the mystery and determine whether someone was orchestrating an elaborate hoax involving multiple members of the urban exploration community. I arrived at the Westfield Shopping Center on a Thursday evening around 11 p.m., planning to spend several hours documenting the space and looking for any evidence of recent activity or security equipment that might explain the mysterious footage. The building was easier to access than I'd expected, with several entry points where vandals had compromised the security barriers over the years since closure. Once inside, I was struck by how perfectly preserved many areas appeared, as if the mall had been abandoned just days rather than years ago. Store gates were intact, directory signs remained clearly visible, and even some decorative elements like planters and seating areas showed minimal deterioration. As I began photographing the main concourse, I noticed that the lighting seemed much brighter than it should have been for a building without active electrical service, and I could hear the faint hum of ventilation systems that supposedly hadn't operated since the closure. The most unsettling discovery came when I reached the electronics store that had featured prominently in the anonymous footage I'd received. Inside the empty retail space, I found a tripod set up in the exact position where the mysterious figure had been photographing, with a camera memory card attached to a note bearing my name and handwriting. The memory card contained images I had no recollection of taking, showing detailed documentation of my current exploration from angles and perspectives that would have been impossible for me to capture alone. The timestamps on these images showed they were created while I was actively walking through the mall, but from positions where no one else was present. I know this sounds like the elaborate fabrication of someone who's spent too much time exploring isolated places, but if you've experienced similar phenomena in abandoned buildings, encountered evidence of your own presence in locations you've never visited, or found documentation of activities you don't remember conducting, sharing your experiences in the comments could help us understand what's actually happening in these forgotten spaces. When I tried to leave the mall around 2 a.m., I discovered that the entry point I'd used had somehow become sealed, with no obvious way to reopen it from the inside. After searching for alternative exits for nearly an hour, I found myself back in the main concourse, where I encountered another figure wearing my red jacket and carrying identical camera equipment. This other version of myself seemed surprised to see me, but not alarmed, as if such meetings were routine occurrences. We stood facing each other for several minutes without speaking, both apparently waiting for the other to explain the situation, before he simply nodded and walked toward the electronics store where I'd found the memory card. I followed, but when I reached the same location, he had vanished completely. I eventually found an emergency exit that led to the parking lot, but when I checked my camera's memory card the next morning, it contained additional images taken after my encounter with the other explorer, showing me having an extended conversation with someone who remained just outside the frame in every photograph. The most disturbing aspect was that these final images were timestamped at 2:17 a.m., the exact time that the original security footage had shown me walking through the mall, even though I was supposedly encountering myself for the first time. This suggests that what I experienced as my initial exploration was actually part of an ongoing cycle that I've been repeating without conscious awareness, possibly for months or years. The maintenance logs for the underground tunnel system show work orders completed by employees who were never hired, but their repairs are real and the infrastructure keeps functioning perfectly. I'm a civil engineer working for the Metropolitan Transit Authority, responsible for maintaining the vast network of service tunnels, utility corridors, and abandoned subway sections that run beneath the city like a hidden circulatory system. It's specialized work that requires security clearance, detailed knowledge of century-old infrastructure maps, and the ability to navigate miles of underground passages that most people don't even know exist. Over the past 5 years, I've become one of the go-to experts for complex repairs in the deepest sections of the tunnel network, areas that were built in the early 1900s and have been modified, expanded, and partially forgotten through decades of urban development above ground. What started bothering me wasn't the usual challenges of working in confined underground spaces, but the growing evidence that someone else has been performing maintenance work in areas where I'm supposedly the only authorized personnel. 3 months ago, I was assigned to inspect a section of abandoned subway tunnel that hadn't been accessed by official crews in over 2 years, according to our digital work order system. The area required special permits because it connects to active water mains and electrical conduits that serve downtown office buildings, making any unauthorized access potentially dangerous to both the worker and the infrastructure above. When I arrived at the tunnel entrance using my master key card, I expected to find the usual signs of neglect: rust accumulation, minor flooding, debris from street construction projects, and the general deterioration that occurs when these spaces are left unmonitored. Instead, I discovered that the entire section had been meticulously maintained, with fresh repairs to pipe joints, newly installed support brackets, and even updated safety signage that met current regulatory standards. The work quality was exceptional, showing the kind of attention to detail and technical expertise that takes years to develop in this specialized field. But according to our personnel records, no maintenance crews had been scheduled for this location, and the tunnel access logs showed no entries for the past 24 months. I documented everything with photographs and submitted a detailed report to my supervisor, suggesting that either our record-keeping system had serious gaps or someone was performing unauthorized work in the tunnel network. My supervisor reviewed the documentation and seemed genuinely puzzled, confirming that no work orders had been issued for that section and no overtime or contractor payments had been authorized. He suggested that perhaps another department had handled the repairs without proper coordination, which wasn't unusual given the complex bureaucracy involved in managing city infrastructure. But when we contacted other relevant departments, water management, electrical services, emergency response, none of them had any record of recent work in that area. The mystery deepened when I started finding work order forms left behind in various tunnel locations, filled out in handwriting I didn't recognize but signed with names of employees who didn't appear in our current personnel database. These forms described completed maintenance tasks in precise technical language, using proper terminology and referencing specific equipment models and part numbers that were accurate for our systems. Most unsettling was that the work described in these mystery forms was always exactly what needed to be done in each location. Preventive maintenance that I would have eventually scheduled myself, but completed weeks or months before I would have identified the problems. If you work in municipal infrastructure, building maintenance, or any field where you've noticed unexplained improvements to systems you're responsible for, please like this video and subscribe. I'm starting to think this phenomenon might be happening to other maintenance professionals, and we need to document these incidents before they become a larger safety or security concern. I decided to investigate more systematically by installing motion-activated cameras in several tunnel locations where I'd found evidence of mysterious maintenance work. The cameras were small, battery-powered units designed for wildlife observation, which I positioned discreetly to monitor key access points and work areas without violating any privacy regulations or security protocols. I chose locations that were particularly isolated and required specialized knowledge to access safely, thinking that if someone was performing unauthorized work, these cameras would capture clear evidence of their identity and methods. The footage I recovered after 2 weeks was both fascinating and deeply unsettling. The cameras had captured clear images of maintenance workers in proper safety gear, using appropriate tools and following correct procedures for the various repairs they were performing. But when I cross-referenced the faces in the footage against our employee database personnel files, and even contractor records going back 10 years, I couldn't identify any of these individuals. They appeared to be experienced professionals who knew exactly what they were doing, but they simply didn't exist in any official capacity within our organization or any related city departments. Even more puzzling was that the timestamp data on the footage showed work being performed during hours when the tunnel sections were supposedly secured and inaccessible. Our keycard logs showed no entries for those time periods, and the security protocols require multiple clearances to access these areas during off hours. Yet the footage clearly showed these unknown workers entering and exiting through sealed access points, using equipment that appeared identical to our standard issue tools, and completing repairs that were subsequently verified as meeting all safety and quality standards. The work they performed was not only competent, but often exceeded the minimum requirements for the various maintenance tasks. I started researching the history of the tunnel system more thoroughly, looking for any patterns or explanations that might account for these mysterious maintenance crews. What I discovered was a complex history of construction projects, modifications, and bureaucratic changes that had created numerous gaps in official documentation. The tunnel network had been built in phases over nearly a century, with different contractors, engineering firms, and city departments responsible for various sections. Many of the original construction records had been lost in fires, floods, or simple bureaucratic neglect, creating areas where the current infrastructure existed, but the administrative knowledge of how to maintain it had been partially forgotten. I found references to maintenance crews from the 1960s and 1970s who had developed specialized expertise in certain tunnel sections, but whose employment records had been lost during various departmental reorganizations and computer system upgrades. Some of these historical maintenance workers had apparently developed such intimate knowledge of specific infrastructure areas that they could perform complex repairs without referring to blueprints or technical manuals. The most intriguing discovery was a series of personnel files from the 1980s, describing a group of maintenance workers who had been hired to handle emergency repairs in the deepest and most complex tunnel sections, but whose employment had been terminated abruptly due to budget cuts and departmental restructuring. According to the incomplete records I found, these workers had protested their layoffs, arguing that their specialized knowledge was irreplaceable and that the tunnel system would suffer without their continued maintenance. Some had apparently continued accessing the tunnels unofficially for several months after their termination, performing necessary repairs without authorization because they believed the infrastructure would fail without proper care. I realize this sounds like an elaborate conspiracy theory, or the fantasy of someone who spent too much time alone in underground spaces, but the physical evidence is undeniable, and the quality of the mysterious maintenance work continues to exceed professional standards. I know I might sound like just another small content creator without significant resources, but if you've experienced similar phenomena in your professional field, encountered evidence of work performed by people who don't officially exist, or noticed unexplained improvements to systems you're responsible for maintaining, sharing your experiences in the comments could help us understand what's actually happening in these forgotten spaces beneath our cities. Last week, I received a work order that wasn't generated through our normal system, requesting an inspection of a tunnel section that doesn't appear on any current maps, but which I somehow knew how to access perfectly. The work order was signed with my own name, but in handwriting I didn't recognize, describing infrastructure problems that I hadn't yet discovered, but which proved to be entirely accurate when I investigated. Most disturbing of all, the timestamp on this work order was dated 3 weeks in the future, and it described repairs that I apparently completed successfully, even though I have no memory of performing the work or even visiting that particular tunnel section. The music box in my grandmother's attic has been playing melodies that won't be composed for another decade, but I only discovered this after I started recording the songs and researching their origins online. I inherited the music box 3 months ago when my grandmother passed away, along with her antique collection and Victorian house. It's an ornate wooden case with brass fittings and a delicate ballerina that spins when wound. According to family stories, it belonged to my great-great-grandmother and had been passed down through 4 generations, though no relatives could remember when or where it was originally purchased. What started as a sentimental keepsake became something far more unsettling when I realized the melodies it played didn't match any classical pieces, folk songs, or popular music I could identify. I'm a music teacher at the local high school, so I have a pretty extensive knowledge of different musical genres and historical periods. but these tunes were completely unfamiliar, despite sounding professionally composed and hauntingly beautiful. The first song that caught my attention was a melancholy waltz in a minor key that played for about 2 minutes before the mechanism wound down. I found myself humming it throughout the day, unable to get the melody out of my head, so I decided to record it using my phone and then search online to see if I could identify the composer or title. After running the audio through music recognition apps and posting clips on forums, I came up empty. Nobody could identify the piece, and classical music experts suggested it might be an obscure composition from an unknown composer. But then something impossible happened that made me question everything I thought I knew about this family heirloom. While browsing social media 2 weeks later, I came across a video of a young pianist performing what she claimed was her original composition, a piece she'd just finished writing for her senior recital. The melody was identical to the waltz from my grandmother's music box, note for note, including subtle ornamentations and dynamic variations that would be impossible to replicate by coincidence. When I checked the date on her video, it had been posted only 3 days earlier, meaning she'd supposedly composed this piece months after I'd first heard it playing from the antique music box in my attic. I reached out to the pianist through direct message, asking about her inspiration for the piece and whether she'd ever heard it performed elsewhere. She responded enthusiastically, explaining that the melody had come to her in a dream, and she'd spent weeks developing it into a full composition for her college music program. She was curious about why I was asking and seemed genuinely surprised when I told her I'd been hearing the same tune for months. When I sent her the recording I'd made of the music box, she was convinced I was playing some kind of elaborate prank, insisting that nobody else could have access to her original work since she'd never performed it publicly before her recital video. The second incident convinced me that something supernatural was occurring with this music box. About a month after the waltz discovery, the mechanism began playing a different tune, an upbeat jazz-influenced piece that sounded like it could have been written for a 1940s big band, complete with syncopated rhythms and complex harmonies that seemed impossible for such a simple mechanical device to reproduce accurately. Again, I recorded the melody and spent hours trying to identify its source, consulting jazz historians, vintage music collectors, and even reaching out to experts at the Smithsonian's music archives. Everyone agreed it sounded authentic to the swing era, but nobody could identify the specific composition or suggest a likely composer. 3 weeks later, while streaming music during my morning commute, I heard the exact same melody playing on a jazz radio station. The DJ introduced it as a newly discovered composition by a previously unknown musician from the 1940s, recently found in a collection of sheet music donated to a university library by the estate of a deceased band leader. According to the radio program, musicologists had authenticated the piece and dated it to approximately 1943, but this was supposedly its first public performance since it was originally written. The coincidence seemed impossible. How could my music box be playing a tune that had been lost for 80 years and only recently rediscovered, especially when I'd been hearing it weeks before the academic discovery was announced? If you've inherited old musical instruments, antique boxes, or family heirlooms that seem to play unfamiliar melodies, please like this video and subscribe. I'm starting. To think there might be other people experiencing similar temporal anomalies with vintage musical items, and we need to document these incidents before they escalate further. I decided to research the history of my family's music box more thoroughly, starting with old photographs and documents I'd found in my grandmother's papers. What I discovered was deeply unsettling. The music box appeared in family photos dating back to the 1920s, always positioned prominently on mantels or side tables, suggesting it held special significance for previous generations. But in several images, I noticed family members gathered around the music box with expressions of concern or fear rather than the joy you'd expect from a cherished musical keepsake. One photograph from 1931 showed my great-grandmother standing next to the music box with a look of genuine distress, while other family members in the background appeared to be covering their ears or turning away from the device. I found a diary entry from my great-aunt, written in 1954, that mentioned the music box playing songs that haven't been born yet, and described how it would sometimes activate on its own during the night, waking the entire household with melodies that seemed to predict family tragedies or significant life changes. According to her account, the music box had played a funeral dirge 3 days before my great-grandfather's unexpected heart attack, and had produced a lullaby version of what later became my grandmother's wedding song 2 weeks before she even met my grandfather. The diary entries suggested that several family members had tried to get rid of the music box over the years, but it always found its way back to the house through mysterious circumstances, showing up in antique shops where family members happened to be browsing, or appearing in estate sales of neighbors who claimed they'd never owned such an item. My great-aunt wrote that the music box seemed to choose its own owners within the family, gravitating toward women who were going through major life transitions or emotional upheavals. As I continued investigating, I discovered that the music box's prophetic abilities extended beyond just predicting future compositions. It began playing melodies that corresponded to significant events in my own life, weeks or months before they occurred. In late October, it played a triumphant march that I later heard at my school's graduation ceremony in December, when I was unexpectedly promoted to department head. In November, it produced a melancholy love song that turned out to be the same tune my ex-boyfriend had been working on as part of his attempt to win me back, a song he claimed he'd written specifically for me, but which the music box had been playing for weeks before our reconciliation conversations began. The most unsettling incident occurred last month, when the music box began playing a complex orchestral piece that seemed to shift between different emotional themes. Sections of joy mixed with passages of deep sorrow, triumphant moments followed by ominous minor key progressions. The melody was unlike anything I'd heard before, spanning nearly 10 minutes and requiring me to wind the mechanism multiple times to hear the complete composition. I recorded the entire piece and spent days trying to analyze its structure and meaning. 2 weeks later, I discovered that this lengthy composition was apparently the theme music for a major film that won't be released until next summer, a movie I'd never heard of, by a composer whose name I didn't recognize for a story that sounded completely unfamiliar. But when I researched the film's production details online, I found promotional materials describing the exact emotional journey that the music box's composition had taken me through. I realize this sounds like elaborate coincidences, or the delusions of someone who spent too much time alone with an old antique. But I've started keeping detailed records of every melody the music box produces, along with timestamps and audio recordings. I know I might seem like just another small content creator without major resources, but if you've experienced similar phenomena with inherited objects, vintage instruments, or family heirlooms that seem to predict future events, sharing your stories in the comments could help us understand what's actually happening with these temporally displaced artifacts. Last night, the music box began playing something that genuinely terrified me, a haunting melody in a minor key that seemed to contain elements of a funeral march mixed with what sounded like a child's lullaby. The combination was deeply unsettling, and as I listened, I had the distinct impression that this song was meant specifically for me, that it was trying to communicate something important about my own future. When I tried to research similar melodies online, I found references to a composer who won't be born until 2031, who will write a famous requiem incorporating lullaby themes. This future composer will create the piece as a memorial for someone who disappeared in 2025, inspiring musicians to explore themes of temporal displacement.
I was helping the movers unload the last box when I realized none of the furniture was mine, but it was all arranged exactly as I would have arranged it. And when I checked the delivery receipt, it showed my correct name and address, but listed a previous residence I'd never lived at in a city I'd never visited, which should have been my first warning that this wasn't a simple logistics error. The moving company had seemed professional enough when they'd arrived that morning. 3 men in matching uniforms who spoke very little but worked with mechanical efficiency. And I'd been so exhausted from my actual move the day before that I hadn't paid close attention to what they were bringing into my new apartment. assuming it was just the standard confusion that comes with relocating to a different state for a job. I wasn't entirely sure I wanted, but as I watched them work, I noticed they moved through my apartment like they'd been there before, placing furniture in spots I hadn't indicated, connecting appliances to outlets they shouldn't have known about. But as I walked through my new place, I discovered a living room set that was nicer than anything I'd ever owned, kitchen appliances that were more expensive than my car, and a bedroom furnished with antiques that looked like they belonged in a museum, all arranged in a layout that felt perfectly natural, as if I'd been living with these items for years instead of seeing them for the first time. And when I touched the leather sofa, it felt familiar under my fingertips, worn in exactly the places where I would sit. When I called the moving company to report the mistake, the dispatcher insisted they delivered everything to the correct address according to their records. And when I described the furniture, she said it matched the inventory exactly. Then put me on hold for so long that I eventually hung up and decided to figure out the situation myself. But not before I heard her mutter something about temporal displacement protocols. That made my stomach clench with inexplicable dread. The strangest part was how comfortable everything felt, how each piece of furniture seemed designed for my specific needs and preferences. And when I sat in the leather armchair by the window, it fit my body perfectly, as if it had been custom-made for someone with my exact proportions, and I found myself thinking that maybe I should just keep quiet and enjoy this unexpected upgrade to my living situation, even though part of me knew that accepting stolen property was wrong, assuming it was stolen and not something much stranger. I started going through the boxes to see if I could find any clues about who this furniture actually belonged to, and I discovered photo albums filled with pictures of me at various ages, but in locations I'd never been, with people I'd never met, living what appeared to be a much more successful and fulfilling life than the one I actually remembered living. And the photos were so convincing that for a moment I wondered if I was having some kind of memory loss, if these were real experiences I'd somehow forgotten. Could someone really have documented a parallel version of my existence? Or was I looking at elaborate fake photographs created by someone who knew me well enough to digitally insert me into scenarios that felt plausible but had never actually happened? The photos showed me graduating from a prestigious university I'd never attended, working at a company I'd never heard of, dating women I'd never met but who looked at me with genuine affection. And in every image, I looked happier and more confident than I'd ever felt in real life, as if this other version of myself had made better choices and lived without the regrets that had been weighing me down for years. And when I looked closely at my face in these pictures, I could see a spark in my eyes that I'd never seen in any mirror. If you're still here, you might want to follow me deeper into this identity crisis, because what I found in the personal documents was worse than discovering someone else's life. Hidden in a desk drawer that had somehow been arranged exactly where I would have put it, I found a complete set of identity documents with my name and photo, but showing a birth date that was 3 years earlier than my actual birthday. Educational credentials from schools I'd never attended, and employment records from jobs I'd never worked, all creating a paper trail for a life that was better than mine in every measurable way, but had never actually been lived by me. And the signatures on these documents looked exactly like my handwriting, down to the peculiar way I dotted my I's and crossed my T's. There were medical records showing that this other version of me had never suffered the childhood illness that had left me with chronic pain Financial statements indicating a bank account with more money than I'd ever seen, and even a mortgage document for the house I'd always dreamed of owning but could never afford. And I realized that someone had created not just fake photographs, but an entire alternate history for me, complete with documentation that would fool any background check. And when I called the bank listed on the statements, they confirmed the account was active and asked if I wanted to check my balance. Could anyone really forge such comprehensive records? Or had I somehow been switched with another version of myself, displaced from a better timeline where I'd made different decisions and lived a more successful life? But the most disturbing discovery was a journal written in my own handwriting, documenting daily events and thoughts that felt familiar but had never actually happened to me, describing relationships and experiences that I could almost remember having but knew I'd never lived. And as I read through years of entries, I started to understand that this wasn't just someone else's life being delivered to my apartment. This was the life I was supposed to have lived, the life I would have lived if I'd made different choices. And the moving company hadn't made a mistake at all. They'd been hired to deliver the furniture and documents from the timeline where I'd been successful and happy, forcing me to confront everything I'd failed to become and everything I'd given up through my own poor decisions. The final entry in the journal was dated tomorrow, describing how I would call the moving company again and demand they take everything back. How I would reject this gift of a better life because I was too afraid to believe I deserved it. And how the movers would return the next day to reclaim everything and deliver it to the next version of myself in another timeline, another apartment, another chance for someone who looked exactly like me to either accept the life they deserved or let it slip away again. And when I finished reading, I heard a truck pulling up outside my window and realized the movers had come back early, that my time was up. And now I'm sitting in this perfect apartment surrounded by evidence of the person I could have been but never was. Wondering if I should call the moving company back or finally accept that maybe this is the universe's way of offering me a second chance to become the version of myself that deserves to own beautiful things and live in comfort instead of settling for the mediocre existence I'd created through my own fears and failures. But knowing that tomorrow I'll probably make the same cowardly choice I've always made and watch the movers take away the only real happiness I've ever accidentally stumbled into. I was riding up to the 15th floor when the elevator suddenly displayed floor 23 and kept climbing. But I work in a 12-story building and there shouldn't be any floors above that. And when I pressed the emergency button, nothing happened. Except the lights flickered and I heard what sounded like machinery grinding somewhere above me that shouldn't exist in a structure I've been entering every day for 3 years. I'd been working late again at the accounting firm, staying until almost midnight to finish the quarterly reports that were due the next morning. And I was the only person left in the building when I called the elevator from the ground floor. But now I was trapped in a metal box that was apparently ascending into architectural impossibility, climbing past floors that violated every building code and defied the basic physics of the structure where I'd spent countless overtime hours, believing I understood the layout completely. The elevator kept rising floor 24, 25, 26, and through the crack between the doors, I could see hallways that looked identical to the offices below, but were somehow wrong, with the same beige carpeting and fluorescent lighting but no windows. No exit signs. No indication that these floors existed in the same reality as the building I knew. And the air that leaked in smelled like ozone, and something metallic that made my teeth ache. When the elevator finally stopped at floor 31, the doors opened to reveal a hallway that stretched further than should have been possible given the building's footprint, lined with office doors that had my company's logo, but room numbers that made no sense, and I could hear the sound of typing coming from behind every door. The rhythmic clicking of keyboards operated by people who were apparently working a shift that started when the rest of the world went to sleep. And the sound was perfectly synchronized, as if dozens of people were typing the exact same document at the exact same speed. I stepped out to investigate, thinking this had to be some kind of architectural mistake or hidden floors I'd never known about. But when I tried to call the elevator back, it was gone, and the button panel on the wall only showed floors 31 through 50, as if the building had somehow grown new levels while I was riding up, expanding itself into space that shouldn't exist above the city skyline I could see from my office window every day. The office doors were unlocked, and when I peered inside, I saw people sitting at desks identical to mine, working on computers that displayed the same spreadsheets I'd been finishing downstairs. But when I looked closer, I realized they were all wearing my face, typing with my hands, living my exact life but displaced into these impossible floors that existed above the world I knew. And they didn't seem to notice me watching them work through the night on reports that would never be submitted to any client I'd ever met. Could anyone really build secret floors above a normal office building without anyone noticing the construction? Or was I having some kind of breakdown brought on by too many late nights and too much caffeine, seeing my own reflection in windows that might not actually be there? I found an office with my nameplate on the door, but inside was a desk covered with reports I'd never written, financial documents from companies I'd never heard of, and a computer logged in with my credentials showing bank transfers and investment. Records that painted a picture of embezzlement and fraud that I'd never committed. And when I tried to log out, the screen displayed a message saying, "Shift ends at 6 a.m. Return to assigned floor," as if I was expected to work here, expected to be part of whatever shadow operation was running above the legitimate business below. And the timestamp showed that I'd apparently been clocking in here every night for the past 6 months. If you're still here, you might want to follow me deeper into this vertical nightmare, because what I found in the executive offices was worse than identity theft. The further I walked down the hallway, the more the offices began to change, becoming more luxurious, more sinister, until I reached a conference room where I could see through the glass walls to a meeting in progress. And the people inside were discussing my life like it was a business plan, referring to me as Subject 247, and reviewing charts that tracked my daily routines, my financial situation, my emotional vulnerabilities, as if my entire existence was just a case study for some kind of corporate experiment designed to create the perfect worker who would never question overtime, never demand raises, never realize they were being exploited. They had footage of me at home, at work, in my car, recorded conversations with my family and friends, and detailed psychological profiles that suggested they'd been monitoring me for years, building a complete picture of who I was so they could create perfect replicas to staff these phantom floors with versions of myself that would never question the work they were doing or wonder why they never went home, never saw sunlight, never had lives outside these fluorescent-lit cubicles. I tried to take pictures with my phone, but the camera showed only empty hallways and blank walls, as if these floors existed in a frequency my phone couldn't detect. And when I attempted to record audio All I could hear was my own voice saying things I'd never said, agreeing to work contracts I'd never signed, accepting responsibilities I'd never volunteered for, as if the building itself was rewriting my history to justify my presence in this impossible space that fed on human labor, like a machine that converted souls into spreadsheets. But here's what keeps me awake now, what makes me question whether I ever really left that elevator, or if I'm still riding up through endless floors of corporate purgatory. When I finally found a stairwell and climbed down what felt like hundreds of steps, when I emerged into the lobby of my familiar building and drove home to my apartment, I discovered that my bank account had been drained. My job had been terminated for attendance issues, and according to my employment records, I'd been working the night shift on the 31st floor for the past 6 months, putting in 8 hours every evening doing work I had no memory of performing. And the security footage from the building showed me entering the elevator every night at midnight and returning to the lobby at 6 a.m. with the blank expression of someone who'd been sleepwalking through a life that wasn't entirely their own. And sometimes I still catch myself pressing the elevator button and riding up past the 12th floor, wondering if those other versions of myself are still up there, still typing, still working overtime for a company that doesn't exist on any floor that should be real. The sleep study that never ends, the sleep study that never ends. I woke up strapped to a hospital bed for the 7th time this week. But according to the clock on the wall, I'd only been asleep for 12 minutes, and the technician monitoring my brain waves was frantically scribbling notes while whispering into a phone about unprecedented REM cycles and consciousness fragmentation beyond normal parameters, which should have been my first warning that this wasn't a routine sleep study. I'd volunteered for what was supposed to be a single overnight session at the University Medical Center, desperate for the $500 they were paying participants. But 3 days into what should have been an 8-hour commitment, I was beginning to understand that the electrodes attached to my skull weren't just monitoring my sleep patterns. They were somehow trapping me in a loop where every time I fell asleep, I lived through entire lifetimes in other people's bodies, experiencing their memories, their fears, their deaths, and then waking up with knowledge that wasn't mine and trauma I'd never actually experienced but felt as real as my own childhood memories. The first night had seemed normal enough. They'd attached the standard monitoring equipment, given me a mild sedative, and told me to sleep naturally while they recorded my brain activity for their research on lucid dreaming and consciousness transfer. But when I woke up 6 hours later, I had vivid memories of being a woman named Sarah who had died in a car accident in 1987, and I could describe her childhood home in perfect detail, her husband's face, the exact song playing on the radio when she crashed, details so specific and personal that when I mentioned them to the technician, his face went pale and he left the room to make several urgent phone calls that I could hear through the thin walls. Every time I fell asleep after that, I became someone else, a soldier who died in Vietnam and whose final thoughts were about his mother's apple pie, a child who drowned in a swimming pool while his parents argued inside the house, an elderly man who had a heart attack while mowing his lawn and spent his last moments wondering if anyone would find his body before it started to smell. And each death was so real, so traumatic, that I woke up screaming with the absolute certainty that I had just died, that my life was over, that I was somehow experiencing the final moments of people who had passed away years or decades before I was born, as if the study was using my brain as a receiver for the consciousness of the dead, downloading their final experiences directly into my neural pathways. The technicians claimed this was a normal part of the research, that the equipment sometimes caused vivid dreams and false memories. But I could see the excitement in their eyes when they reviewed my brain scans. Could hear them discussing successful transfers and consciousness mapping in the hallway outside my room. And when I demanded to leave, they explained that the consent form I'd signed included a clause about extended monitoring periods, and that I'd agreed to remain until the study was complete, whenever that might be. And they showed me my signature on documents I didn't remember signing, agreeing to procedures I'd never heard explained. If you're still here, you might want to follow me deeper into this nightmare, because what I discovered about the other test subjects was infinitely worse than my own situation. During my brief periods of wakefulness, I started noticing other beds in the facility, other participants who had been there much longer than me, some for weeks or months according to their charts. And they all had the same hollow look in their eyes, the same way of staring at nothing while their lips moved, silently, as if they were having conversations with people who weren't there. And when I tried to talk to them, they would respond with names that weren't their own, telling me stories about lives they'd never lived, deaths they'd never died, families they'd never had, speaking with accents they shouldn't have known and using slang from decades before they were born. Could anyone really develop technology that could transfer human consciousness between bodies? Or was this just an elaborate psychological experiment designed to break down our sense of identity and reality until we couldn't tell the difference between our own memories and the experiences they were implanting in our brains? I managed to sneak a look at my medical file when the night shift technician fell asleep and discovered that I wasn't listed as a test subject at all. I was classified as consciousness donor 247, and the notes indicated that my original personality was being archived, while my brain was used as a vessel for storing the memories and experiences of deceased individuals, part of a project called Digital Afterlife Integration that was attempting to create a technological form of immortality by uploading human consciousness into living brains, using unwitting volunteers as biological hard drives for the dead. And the success rate was measured not by how well we retained our own identities, but by how completely we could be overwritten with someone else's memories. The worst part was realizing that every time I woke up, I was losing a little bit more of myself, forgetting my own childhood while retaining perfect memories of Sarah's wedding day, losing my mother's face while gaining crystal clear recollections of the Vietnam soldiers' basic training. And I started to understand that eventually there would be nothing left of me at all, just a collection of other people's memories walking around in my body. And the technicians would have successfully created a form of resurrection that didn't bring back the dead so much as replaced the living with digital ghosts who thought they were still alive and had no idea they were wearing someone else's skin. But here's what terrifies me most. As I'm writing this, I can feel Sarah's memories becoming stronger than my own, can remember her first kiss more clearly than my own name, can feel her personality taking over mine like a virus that's finally reached critical mass. And I'm starting to wonder if the person writing these words is really me anymore, or if I'm just one more consciousness trapped in a body that's no longer mine, trying to warn people about a sleep study that never ends and never lets you wake up as the same person who went to sleep. And sometimes I catch myself humming songs I've never heard while speaking in a voice that sounds like mine but feels borrowed. And I know that soon I'll stop fighting the transfer and accept that I'm Sarah now, that I've always been Sarah, and the young man who volunteered for this study was just a temporary vessel waiting to be filled with someone more deserving of life. I only noticed the second shadow when I turned off the bathroom light and saw it stretching across the carpet beside mine, even though I was the only person in the room. It moved when I didn't, lengthening toward the door as if it were trying to leave, and I swear I heard a faint dragging sound like bare feet on thin carpet, even though I hadn't moved an inch. This was 2 winters ago, off a lonely stretch of Route 19 in rural Wyoming, the kind of highway where the gas stations close at sundown and the silence feels heavier than the snow piling against your windshield. I was driving cross-country after a family visit gone bad, desperate to put miles between me and my hometown, when the storm hit and forced me off the road. The only light for miles was a flickering neon sign that read simply Motel, half the bulbs dead, humming in the freezing wind. The parking lot was almost empty. 2 cars, both buried under snow like they hadn't moved in days. Inside, the office smelled like damp paper and stale coffee. The man behind the counter didn't greet me. He just slid a key across the laminate and muttered, "End of the hall, room 6. He never asked for ID. I should have turned around then, but exhaustion makes you compromise, and my body was too tired to care about red flags. The hallway to room 6 was narrow, walls stained yellow from years of cigarette smoke, and the buzzing of the overhead light followed me like an insect caught in my skull. The carpet squished faintly under my boots as if it were still wet from some long-ago spill. When I opened the door, the smell hit me. Metallic, faintly sweet, like rust mixed with something organic. The room was tiny. 1 bed with sunken springs, a single lamp bolted to the wall, heavy curtains that refused to fully close, letting in thin slices of storm-lit darkness. At first, nothing seemed wrong beyond the smell. I set my bag down, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. That's when the first sound came, a low creak, not from the wind or the walls, but from inside the room. I thought it was the bed shifting beneath me, until I realized it came from the corner opposite the lamp, where the wallpaper had peeled into wide curls. I got up, pressed my hand against the plaster, solid cold. But as I leaned in, I heard faint whispering, too low to make out words, like someone murmuring through the wall. I told myself it was the wind slipping through cracks in the siding, but then the light flickered. When it came back, the whispering stopped, and something else changed. My suitcase, which I'd left by the door, was now beside the bed. I laughed. Nervously, maybe I dragged it there absent-mindedly. But when I touched it, the zipper was undone, clothes folded differently than I'd packed them. I didn't unpack. I just shoved the bag back to the door, locked the deadbolt twice, and tried to sleep. It was past midnight when I woke to the sound of running water. The bathroom sink was on full blast, steam curling into the air. I hadn't left it on. I shut it off, heart hammering, and that's when I saw it. 2 shadows on the floor, both stretching from my side of the bed. One was mine. The other was longer, thinner, with shoulders slightly hunched. I froze. The second shadow tilted its head toward me. My breath fogged in the cold air, and then, impossibly, the shadow inhaled. I could hear it. A slow, ragged draw of air, like lungs too dry to function. I bolted for the door. The deadbolt spun freely, but the door wouldn't open, as if pressure pushed back from the other side. That's when the whispering returned, louder now, layered voices overlapping, a man, a woman, a child, all speaking in tones that felt wet, gurgling like water in throats. Stay. The word was clear. The lamp beside the bed flickered. Again, and for a heartbeat, the room changed. The wallpaper peeled entirely, exposing wooden planks blackened with rot. The bed frame was splintered, mattress so dark. Dark streaks ran along the floor toward the bathroom, streaks that looked too much like drag marks. Then, it was gone. Clean motel room again, except for the smell. Stronger now. Copper and rot. I backed into the corner, phone shaking in my hands, no signal. The whispering rose to a frantic chorus. Words overlapped, some pleading, some angry. I couldn't tell if they were warning me or welcoming me. I shouted anything to drown them out, and for a split second, silence. Then 3 knocks on the bathroom door. Slow, deliberate. I hadn't closed it. "Who's there?" I croaked, voice breaking. The door creaked open by itself, inch by inch, revealing darkness beyond. Darker than any unlit bathroom should be. Deeper, like the space stretched farther back than the building's walls. Something scraped against tile. Then I saw movement. A hand, pale and waterlogged, fingers too long, nails cracked and blackened. It gripped the doorway and pulled something forward. Its face, if you can call it that, was slack, like wet paper barely clinging to bone. 2 eye sockets weeping black water. Its mouth opened, but instead of a voice, the chorus of whispers poured out, louder, deafening. I stumbled backward, tripped over the bed frame, scrambled to the door. It opened easily this time, like it had never been stuck. I ran into the hallway barefoot, down the narrow corridor toward the office. The lights flickered with every step. Behind me, wet footsteps slapped against the carpet, faster than mine. I didn't dare look back. The office was empty when I burst in. No clerk, no phone, just rows of keys on hooks. Every hook except one, room 6. The storm had stopped when I stumbled outside. The parking lot was empty. The 2 buried cars gone, no tire tracks in the snow. My own car door was unlocked, keys still in the ignition, even though I swear I pocketed them. I drove until the sun came up, didn't stop until I hit the next town. When I finally pulled over, I checked my phone. Dozens of voicemails. All blank, except for faint whispering and running water in the background. That was 2 years ago. I still get voicemails sometimes from numbers that trace back to nowhere. Sometimes I hear knocks in the background. Sometimes breathing. But here's the part I've never told anyone, and I need someone to explain it to me. 2 weeks ago, after I moved into a new apartment halfway across the country, I woke up to the smell of rust and damp carpet. My suitcase, which I'd left in the closet, was sitting by my bed, unzipped. And when I turned off the light, I saw it again. 2 shadows. Mine, and the one that moves when I don't. I drove into Widow's Lake just as the last pale light of dusk surrendered to creeping fog. The narrow road twisting between pines, dripping with moss until it ended at a wooden gate, rusted shut on vertical slats bearing no sign. My GPS blinked. As I turned it off, heart thumping from the drive here. A weekend retreat in an old lakeside cabin my friend had rented. a chance to escape my thoughts after losing Claire. I lifted the gate, the metal groaning like a wounded animal, and trudged through grass damp with evening dew until the cabin appeared through the haze. A cub, squat two-story of weather-clabbered and tar-black roof, windows like dark eye sockets. The porch light was dead. I fumbled for the key, an iron skeleton from my friend's text. The door swung open into a stale breath of air, the scent of pine needles and mildew. Inside, planks sagged under my weight, and the fireplace lay cold, its hearth littered with sodden logs and ash. I dropped my bag, struck a match, and lit the lantern on the mantel, its glow revealing a living room frozen in time. Dusty armchairs, framing a low table, mugs still set, and a lone photograph lying face up in the center, a picture of Claire and me, grinning at some summer fair. The date stamped 7.14/16. My chest seized. I spent the first night sleepless, pacing between rooms, each door swinging shut behind me in the stale hush. At 2:13 a.m., the lantern's wick sputtered as if struggling, and I heard footsteps from the loft. Soft, deliberate, never in my life had I felt such dread. I crept upstairs, every breath loud, until I reached the loft landing and saw the door cracked open a sliver. Inside lay a narrow bed, tattered sheets, and a journal on a side table. The cover read, October 1932, its pages yellowed and brittle. I opened it, in faded cursive. The entries described a woman, Eliza, who lived alone after her husband drowned in Widow's Lake. She wrote of whispering shadows at night, of fingernails tapping at her door, of finding her husband's wet footprints on the floorboards. The final entry ended mid-sentence. Tonight he calls me, and then blank pages that trembled in my lantern light. A knock at the loft door made me jump 3 raps, then a pause, then 3 more. Gooseflesh crawled up my arms. I backed. Down the stairs, the journal slipping from my fingers, thud against wood. Morning brought a sky so gray it felt like twilight. I brewed coffee on a small kerosene stove in the kitchenette, hand shaking, and heard a low tap at the window. Just one, then nothing. Through the glass, I saw the floating mist over the lake, and at its shore, a figure in white standing motionless. I rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, the figure was gone. I checked my phone, no signal. I texted my friend, but no reply. An hour passed before I ventured out with only the lantern. The path to the lake was slick with mud, roots throttling the ground like veins. Every few yards, I found trampled grass and damp footprints bare, footprint-shaped depressions leading away from the cabin. My heart pounded as I followed them to the water's edge, where a small rowboat bobbed against a single oar pinned. Upright in the sand, on its seat lay a soggy life jacket. I reached for it, felt gills of cold water draw on my fingertips, and looked up. The figure in white drifted at the far end of the boat, swaying like a mannequin. I took a stumbling step back. The lantern's flame guttered, and I heard a woman's sob carried on the wind. Claire's voice soft, terrified. I raced back to the cabin, body numb with panic, and bolted the door. Inside, the lantern lit the room in a wavering halo. Everything looked the same, until I noticed the coffee table. The photograph of Claire and me now had a second image beneath. Ours a smudged, ghostly, a transparent silhouette of a woman in 1930s dress, her eyes hollow orbs staring through me. My breath caught. I pinched my arm. The silhouette stayed. I wanted to burn the photo, tear down the journal, flee. but a low hum grew in the walls, like a chant rising from the floorboards. I covered my ears. It grew louder, our laughter echoing, then Eliza's moans. Suddenly, the coffee table slid across the floor on its own, sending the mugs crashing to shards. The lantern plunged to the floor. In sputtering darkness, I heard the oar tapping on the porch tap. Tap. Tap 1, 2, 3. I scrambled for the matchbox, struck a flame, and the lantern flickered on, illuminating the hallway. A figure stood at the foot of the stairs, Eliza in her threadbare dress, dripping water onto the runner, eyes pleading. Behind her, Claire's silhouette flickered, half transparent, calling me with trembling hand. I wanted to scream, but no. Sound came. Eliza raised a finger to her lips, head cocked, tears shining like jewels. Then she pointed at the photo shattered on the floor, our faces now fractured across 1,000 shards. I sank to my knees, shock ripping through me. The walls shivered, and from the loft came a final whisper. He has returned. I bolted, for the door heart drumming, but the latch refused. Branches scraped against windows. Water pooled at the threshold. I heard a splash outside, then another, as if someone waded through the mud toward me. The lantern flickered again and died. I was swallowed by blackness. At dawn, I woke on the front porch, dripping wet, my clothes torn, the journal clutched in my hand. The cabin door stood wide open, its hinges swinging in the breeze. Inside, the coffee table was gone. The photo vanished, and the journals. Last pages had been torn out. The boat was gone too, only the oar lay half buried in sand. I ran down the path, chased by memories and shadows, until I reached my car, still parked inches from the gate. My friend's call finally came through. "Hey man, I've been worried. Where are you?" My voice shook as I responded, "I'm never going back." But this morning, I woke to a text from my friend. "Found something weird at the cabin, check your email." My inbox held a single photo. Me asleep on that porch at dawn, captured on his new trail camera. Behind me, in the window's reflection, stood two figures, one pale woman with hollow eyes, and beside her my own terrified face. If you ever find a cabin by a lake where no road leads, and its windows stare like empty skulls, don't approach. Don't let the mist draw you in, because once the water calls your name, and the walls whisper your regrets, you'll be trapped in that time-worn frame with no road back, no dawn to save you, only the echo of a portrait and peeling paint. The chant of a woman who vanished decades ago, and the last sight of your own face pressed against a window you can never break. I thought it was sweet the first time I heard it, the gentle tinkling of the antique music box sitting on my wife's grandmother's dresser, its chipped ivory paint and ornate brass filigree glowing softly in the nursery's lamplight. We'd just moved into the old farmhouse outside Willow Creek, drawn by the quiet fields and the promise of a fresh start after years in the city. Our daughter, Hazel, was born 2 weeks ago, and my wife, Lauren, inherited the music box from her grandmother's attic, claiming the melody reminded her of childhood summers spent chasing fireflies in the orchard. I wound the key, watched the tiny ballerina spin, and felt my chest relax as the tinkling lullaby filled the room, until I realized Hazel hadn't woken with the sound. Instead, she slept more deeply than ever before, soft breaths rising and falling in time with the tune. I smiled at Lauren, convinced that at least something in our life was settling into a gentle rhythm. But gentle rhythms, I learned too late, can become the most insidious prisons. Within days, the music box's melody haunted the house. At first, it was an unexpected comfort. Late at night, when the wind howled down the chimney and Lauren and I lay beside Hazel in the dim nursery, the box would play itself softly, as though the ballerina longed to dance once more. It would start as a single note, barely audible, then build into the full melody, each crystalline tone echoing through the wooden hallways. On the mornings, I stumbled in to check on Hazel, expecting to find her crying. I found her peaceful, eyes closed, as if the music soothed her like a balm. Yet even then, I noticed something odd. Hazel's tiny lips were moving, as if singing along, though I heard no other voice stop by the end of the week. The box had moved from the dresser to the changing table, replaying its tune each time Hazel stirred. I found myself tiptoeing through the dark hallway to wind it, afraid to wake her, because the melody soothed her into an unbroken sleep. Between feedings and diaper changes, I caught myself humming that same lullaby under my breath. The tune lodged in my mind like a song that wouldn't let me forget. I hummed it in the shower, at the breakfast table, in my dreams always the same sweet, lulling pattern, ascending and descending, like wind dancing through chimes. Then one morning, everything changed. I woke to find Hazel crying, a piercing wail that tore me from sleep. I raced into the nursery, flung open the door, only to hear that awful melody already playing, each note alternating with her sobs, merging into a grotesque duet. The ballerina spun for no one. The crib was empty. My heart lurched as I crouched beside the low mattress and saw the music box perched neatly inside the crib, the key wound tight, melody half finished. Hazel was nowhere in sight. Lauren burst into the room, panic draining color from her cheeks. "Where is she?" she cried, but the only answer was the twinkling melody and the crimson smear on the mattress where Hazel's pacifier lay discarded. I carried the music box downstairs to the kitchen table, set it on a stack of dusty newspapers, wound the key, and smashed it with the bottom of a cast iron pan until the ballerina broke free and the cylinder's pins snapped in ruin. A final stutter of the melody echoed, then silence. I scanned the house. Baby monitor dead, windows locked, doors bolted. I called Lauren's name, pounding on bedroom doors, but the house offered only emptiness and echoing footsteps that weren't mine. The front porch lined with rocking chairs held only shadows. Outside, the front yard stretched into fields heavy with fog, no sign of footprints. And the only sound anywhere was the sudden, monstrous stillness. We tore the farmhouse apart, searching closets, crawl space, attic, the storm cellar beneath the kitchen floorboards. Nothing. Just creaking wood and cold. Drafts where walls should have been solid. When I returned to the nursery, I found the crippled music box lying on Lauren's side of the bed, twisted metal gleaming in the morning sun. Its ballerina had reattached itself, her arms extended as if balancing on tiptoe porcelain face, perfect and untouched. My blood ran cold. I hurled a wrench at it, but the hinges snapped back, stronger than steel, and the lid flipped open of its own accord. The melody resumed, faint but unmistakable. That was when I saw it. Hazel's crib, empty again, but this time her tiny handprint imprinted on the painted wall just above the mattress. Not smudged but carved, as though pressed by a child's fist into the plaster. Beneath it, in the same tiny print style, scratched into the wall, "Find me." Lauren and I embraced, tears mingling until exhaustion collapsed us onto the floor. In the haze before consciousness, I heard the music box tinkling again, as though it moved through the house, dancing on its hinges, coaxing us into another. Searched out the next day, I called my sister, still 2 hours away, and begged her to come stay with us until we figured out what to do. I smashed every clock in the house, hoping to drown out that melody that haunted my mind. But by dusk, the grandfather clock by the stairs chimed that lullaby in its deep bass, the pendulum swinging in perfect cadence. We unplugged the stereo, threw away our phones, bricked the windows shut, cut power to the fuse box. Still the lullaby found us. Voices joined in now, delicate and childlike, singing in harmonies that rose from the basement vents, drifted under the door jambs, slipped through cracks in the hardwood. At night, I dreamt of walking through endless hallways, the boxes lining the walls, each lid opening as I passed to reveal a dancing ballerina, her face porcelain, her eyes black voids. And at the end of the hall, my daughter sat atop a pedestal, smiling, hands pressed to her ears as though to block out a cacophony only she could hear Doug by the time my sister arrived. The farmhouse had drained every ounce of comfort it once held. We barricaded ourselves in the kitchen, lanterns lit, chairs shoved under the door, while the nursery door swayed open and shut by unseen hands. The lullaby rose and fell like a breathing thing. "We have to destroy it," I told my sister, voice shaking. She nodded and brought a sledgehammer, but the moment we swung at the music box, now perched on the countertop like a trophy, the floorboards buckled beneath it, wood cracking in geometric patterns, and the box rose on its own, spinning slowly. In midair, its lid opened, and the melody soared higher than humanly possible, a crystalline scream that ruptured my eardrums. The lanterns blew out. Darkness pressed in until I felt the ballerina's foot at my throat, and then it stopped. Every sound snapped shut. My sister screamed as I fumbled for the door, dragging her outside into the moonlight. We ran to the orchard behind the house, where the overgrown rows of apple trees stood silent under stars. The lullaby teased us from the farmhouse, soft, coaxing, insistent. I dared not look back, but I heard my sister's sobs behind me, and I saw that familiar red dress, Hazel's favorite, floating past moonlit branches. The music box balanced on her tiny head. Her laughter, tinkling like glass wind chimes, echoed across the fields as she drifted toward the old barn at the far edge of the orchard. We chased her across wet grass, the lullaby guiding our steps until we reached the barn door. It stood, wide open, darkness deeper inside than the new moon. I caught a glimpse of Hazel inside, her back turned, humming that same lullaby as she wound the music box's key. My sister called to her. Hazel turned, porcelain face expressionless, eyes glowing in the lamplight. She lifted the box over her head and released the key. It floated upward and vanished into the rafters. Then the ballerina began to spin faster. Then physics allowed, the melody speeding into a frantic cascade that lifted dust from the floor, sucked the cold air from our lungs. I lunged to grab Hazel's arm, but she slipped through my grasp like smoke, her outline blurring, as though she was already becoming part of the music box's world. My sister screamed. I screamed, but the lullaby drowned us both. The barn walls shuddered, the hay bales cough. I came to in my house again, morning light pouring through untouched windows, the nursery door closed tight, the crib empty. The music box was on the mattress, ballerina intact, lid wide open, silent. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Beneath its base lay a single scrap of paper, yellowed and curling, with 4 words in a child's scrawl. "Thanks for the song." I packed a bag and left at sunrise. No sign of my sister or Hazel. No echo of their voices anywhere. But every few blocks, I passed an antique stall set up alongside the road, and there it would be. That music box, polished and gleaming, ballerina spinning in the glass case as though newly restored. A sign above read, "For sale. Vintage music box. Plays a soothing lullaby for a lifetime of peaceful sleep." I never stopped hearing that melody. Even now, months later, when I close my eyes, I can feel its weight. A gentle pull at my mind, coaxing me toward a memory I can't reach. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear a child humming along a voice that calls me, "Mama," and a low whisper in the darkness, "Play it again." If you ever see that music box in a shop window, don't wind the key. Don't let the ballerina dance. Because once you hear its song, you'll follow it home, step by step, until the only lullaby you know is the one that costs everything you love.
I shouldn't be telling you this, I really shouldn't. But every time I close my eyes, I see that purple glow seeping through the cracks, and I hear that sound, like glass breaking in reverse, like screaming played backwards. 3 weeks ago, I was just another urban explorer with a camera and too much curiosity. Now I can't sleep without the lights on, and I jump every time my phone buzzes with that same notification tone. It started with a Reddit post on r/Seattle that everyone's probably seen by now. Someone posted a blurry photo of what looked like violet light bleeding through a boarded-up entrance near Pioneer Square. The caption was simple, "Anyone know what this is?" Started glowing 3 days ago. The comments exploded, hundreds of people claiming they'd seen the same light, felt the same weird pull toward that specific spot. Most dismissed it as another hoax, but I live 6 blocks from there. I had to see for myself. If you're from Seattle, you know exactly where I'm talking about. That little alley between Occidental and First Avenue, the one tourists always miss but locals use as a shortcut. The entrance has been sealed since 2019 after some structural damage, but somehow this purple glow was emanating from behind the plywood boards. And here's the thing, I should mention this now before I go any further. If this resonates with you, if any of this sounds familiar, please hit that like button and subscribe. I need to know I'm not losing my mind here. I need to know someone else has experienced what I'm about to tell you. The first night I went, I brought my usual gear. Headlamp, backup batteries, phone with full charge. The glow was real, no question. It pulsed every 17 seconds. I timed it, like some massive heart beating beneath the city. The weird part wasn't the light itself, though. It was how it made me feel. You know that sensation when you're falling asleep and suddenly jolt awake? That falling feeling? It was exactly like that, but constant, like gravity was pulling me in the wrong direction. I found a loose board on the side where someone had pried it back enough to squeeze through. The moment I stepped into that space, my phone started acting up. The flashlight would flicker randomly, and I kept getting notifications for messages that weren't there. But I could see the source of the light now, a section of the old sidewalk that had partially collapsed, revealing what looked like a room nobody had seen in over a century. The Seattle Underground is full of weird spaces, remnants from when they raised the street level back in the 1900s. But this felt different. This felt intentional. The walls were lined with what looked like mirrors, but they reflected that same violet light instead of my image. And the sound, God, that sound, like someone was playing a recording of voices, but the tape was running backward. I should have left then. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, but you know how it is when you're exploring. You tell yourself it's just another abandoned room, just another historical curiosity. You don't want to admit that something is genuinely wrong, because admitting that means admitting you're in real danger. I spent maybe 10 minutes down there that first night, just documenting everything with my phone. The footage looked normal on my screen. But when I watched it back at home, there were these gaps, seconds where the image would just freeze while the audio continued. And in those frozen moments, if you looked closely at the reflection in those mirror things, you could see shapes moving behind me. Shapes that definitely weren't there when I was filming. Have you ever had something happen to you that was so weird, so impossible, that you convinced yourself you imagined it? That's what I did for 3 days. I told myself the mirrors were just old glass with chemical stains, that the gaps in the footage were just phone glitches, that the sound was probably just water pipes or settling foundations. But then the dreams started. Every night, the same dream. I'm back in that room, but now I can understand what the backward voices are saying. They're reading names, long lists of names over and over, and I recognize some of them. People who disappeared from Seattle over the past 50 years. People whose missing person cases went cold. And at the end of each list, they say my name. They say it like they're adding it to the collection. On the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go back. I had to prove to myself that it was just my imagination running wild. This time, I brought my girlfriend Sarah with me, figuring that if I was losing my mind, at least I'd have a witness. Sarah didn't want to go. She said something about the whole situation felt cursed, which made us both laugh because Sarah's not superstitious at all. She's a programmer, logical to a fault. But she came anyway, mostly, I think, because she was worried about my mental state. The purple glow was brighter that night, and it wasn't just pulsing anymore. It was almost breathing, getting brighter and dimmer in this organic rhythm. When we squeezed through the boards, Sarah immediately grabbed my arm. She felt it too, that wrongness, that sense of falling while standing still. But here's where everything went sideways. When we got down into that mirror room, Sarah wasn't seeing what I was seeing. She saw an empty underground space with some water damage and weird mineral deposits on the walls. No mirrors, no purple light, just a regular abandoned room that smelled like mildew and rust. For her, my phone's flashlight was working fine. For me, it was still flickering and showing those phantom notifications. We were standing in the same space, but experiencing completely different realities. That's when I realized this wasn't about the room at all. It was about me. Something in that space had chosen me specifically. "There's nothing here," Sarah kept saying. "It's just an old basement. Can we please go home?" But I could see her in the mirrors now, reflected dozens of times, and in each reflection she looked more and more concerned, more and more like she was seeing something that terrified her. Even though the Sarah standing next to me seemed completely calm, I started taking pictures frantically, trying to capture what I was seeing so I could prove it to her later. But every photo came out differently. Sometimes the mirrors were there, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes the purple light filled the frame, sometimes it was just darkness. And in some of the photos, there were people in the reflections. People who definitely weren't in the room with us. That's when Sarah started crying. Not the Sarah next to me, but all the Sarahs in the mirrors. Dozens of versions of her, all weeping silently, all pointing at something behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there except the entrance we'd come through. "We need to leave," she said, and this time, both versions of her, the real one and the reflected ones, were saying it in unison. "We need to leave right now." As we climbed back up to street level, I looked back one more time. The purple glow was gone. The room was just a regular abandoned space filled with debris and shadows. But on my phone, I had 17 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, all received while we were underground, even though my phone had shown no signal the entire time. When I played back the voicemails later, they were all the same thing, that backward voice sound, but when I ran it through audio software to reverse it, they were all saying the same phrase: "Room 7, room 7, room 7. I started researching the history of that specific location, digging through city archives and old newspaper reports. What I found made everything so much worse. In 1923, there was a boarding house on that exact spot. The basement had been divided into small rooms for transient workers. One night, 7 people disappeared from room 7. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, no trace of where they went. The case was never solved, but here's the detail that made my blood run cold. According to the police report, witnesses heard voices coming from room 7 for 3 days after the disappearances. Voices speaking in what they described as reverse language, like someone playing a phonograph backward. The boarding house was demolished in 1924. When they raised the street level, they just built over the foundation, sealing those basement rooms permanently. Until now. Have you ever experienced something like this, something that felt like it was specifically meant for you, like you were chosen? Because I keep thinking about all those Reddit comments, all those people who said they felt drawn to that purple light. What if we're all experiencing the same thing? What if that room is still collecting people one at a time, and we're all just documenting our own disappearances? I haven't been back to that alley since the night with Sarah, but I know it's still there, waiting. The purple glow shows up in my peripheral vision sometimes, especially late at night when I'm alone. And my phone keeps getting those phantom notifications, messages from numbers that don't exist, all saying the same thing. Room 7 is waiting. The worst part is, I want to go back. Despite everything, despite the terror and the wrongness and the complete logical impossibility of it all, part of me is desperate to return to that mirror room. It's like an addiction, this need to understand what's happening to me. And I think that's exactly what it wants me to feel. If you live in Seattle, if you've seen that purple glow, if you've felt that falling sensation near Pioneer Square, please don't go looking for it. Please don't do what I did. But if you do, if you can't help yourself, then document everything. Take pictures, record video, leave a trail. Because I think the only way we're going to figure this out is together. Last night I had the dream again, but this time when they read the list of names, mine wasn't at the end anymore. It was in the middle, and they were adding new names after it. Names I recognized from the comments section of that original Reddit post. I'm documenting all of this because I think we're running out of time. If you made it through this story, hit like and subscribe. Not for me, but so others can find this warning before it's too late. I shouldn't be telling you this, but if you're from northwestern Montana, if you've ever hiked the backcountry trails around Glacier, if you've felt that crawling sensation between your shoulder blades when you're alone in those woods, you need to know what I found up there. And if you think you can handle hearing this through to the end, hit that like button now. Consider it a warning to yourself. 3 months ago, I was just another search and rescue volunteer. 26 years old, born and raised in Whitefish, spent my summers guiding tourists through the park since I was 18. I thought I knew every trail, every hidden creek, every rock formation from Lake McDonald to the Continental Divide. I was wrong, dead wrong. It started when Grant Marcuccio went missing in August. You might have seen it on the news. 32-year-old mountaineer, experienced climber, vanished without a trace on what should have been a routine day hike. The official story was that his body was found 2 days later by Two Bear Air, but that's not the whole truth. That's not even close to the whole truth. I was part of the ground crew that morning when the helicopter spotted something. Radio crackled with coordinates, and we hiked through thick pine and huckleberry to reach the location. What we found wasn't just Grant. What we found was Grant's body, arranged in a perfect circle of stones, each rock the exact same size. His boots placed precisely 10 feet away, pointing toward the tree line. His clothes were folded neatly beside him. No tears, no blood, no signs of struggle. But here's what they didn't put in the news. His eyes were wide open, staring at something in the canopy above, and his lips were pulled back in what I can only describe as a smile of absolute terror. The ranger in charge, Sarah Tollefson, she's worked these mountains for 15 years. I watched her face go pale as paper when she saw the scene. She made us all sign additional confidentiality agreements that day, said it was standard protocol for ongoing investigations. Standard protocol, my ass. I've been on dozens of recovery missions, and I'd never seen anything like that before. But what really got to me, what's been eating at me for 3 months now, was what I found in the dirt next to those perfectly arranged stones. Boot prints. Not Grant's boots. We had those. These prints were smaller, barefoot impressions pressed deep into the earth with what looked like elongated toes, and they formed a trail leading directly into the densest part of the forest, where the old mining roads peter out into nothing but wilderness. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this sounds like one of those missing 411 stories, right? People vanishing under impossible circumstances in national parks, leaving behind evidence that doesn't make sense. Well, you'd be right to think that. Because 3 days after we found Grant, I decided to follow those prints. Have you ever made a decision that you knew, even as you were making it, would change everything? That's what this felt like. Standing at the edge of that trail with my headlamp cutting through pre-dawn darkness, knowing I should turn around, knowing I should call this in, knowing I should do literally anything except what I was about to do. But I couldn't shake the image of Grant's terrified smile. I couldn't stop thinking about those impossibly neat stone circles. The prints led deeper into the mountains than any trail I'd ever mapped. They wound through groves of ancient cedar, past hidden meadows that didn't appear on any topographical survey, along the edges of ravines so deep I couldn't see the bottom even with my flashlight. And the strangest thing, the prints were always fresh, like whatever made them was walking just ahead of me, always just out of sight. After about 2 hours of hiking, the forest went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, dead quiet. No bird calls, no insects, no wind through the trees, just my breathing and the crunch of pine needles under my boots. That's when I started hearing the whispers. At first, I thought it was just wind through the branches, but wind doesn't call your name. Wind doesn't speak in voices you almost recognize. The whispers were coming from every direction at once, layering over each other until they became this horrible chorus of sound that seemed to burrow into my skull. And underneath it all, barely audible, I could hear someone crying. I followed the sound to a clearing I swear wasn't on any map I'd ever studied. In the center stood a ring of 7 massive pine trees, each one carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Spirals and intersecting lines that seemed to shift and move when I looked at them directly. Between the trees, scattered across the forest floor like some kind of twisted gallery, were personal belongings. Backpacks, hiking boots, water bottles, cell phones. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all arranged in those same precise circles of stones I'd seen around Grant's body. And there, sitting against the largest tree with her back to me, was a woman in a red jacket. I called out to her, asked if she was okay, if she needed help. She didn't move. I got closer, and that's when I saw the truth that's been following me home every night since. She was mummified, completely preserved, like she'd been sitting there for months or maybe years, but her clothes were pristine, her hair was perfect, and her skin had this weird waxy quality that reflected my flashlight beam like polished stone. But here's the part that makes my hands shake even now. She was holding something, a small digital camera, the kind hikers use to document their trips, and it was still recording. I should have run. I should have grabbed that camera and run straight back to the ranger station. Instead, I hit playback. The footage showed the woman, her name was Emily, I learned later, Emily Chen from Seattle, hiking with 3 friends, laughing, taking selfies, enjoying a perfect August day in Glacier National Park. But as the recording played, their voices started to change. They became confused, disoriented. The GPS on their phones stopped working. The trail they'd been following seemed to shift and branch in ways that shouldn't be possible. And then, one by one, her friends started walking away. Not running, not panicking, just walking. Like they were being called by something only they could hear. Emily kept recording, kept begging them to come back, but they disappeared into the tree line without looking back. The last frame showed Emily alone in the clearing, pointing the camera at herself one final time, whispering, "If someone finds this, tell my family I'm sorry. Tell them the mountains took me, but I went willingly. I had to. I can hear it calling, and I can't fight it anymore." The recording cut to black, but the camera kept running. Hours and hours of footage showing Emily sitting in that exact position, never moving, never aging, just waiting. And in the background, barely visible in the infrared display. I could see shapes moving between the trees. Tall, impossibly thin figures that seemed to glide rather than walk, always staying just at the edge of the frame. I don't know how long I stood there watching that footage, but when I finally looked up, the sun was setting, and I realized I'd been in that clearing for over 8 hours. 8 hours that felt like 8 minutes. And that's when I noticed something that made my blood turn to ice water. My own name was carved into the bark of the tree Emily was leaning against. Fresh carving, like it had just been done. Have you ever had a moment where reality just breaks? Where everything you thought you understood about the world suddenly becomes negotiable? That's what happened to me in that clearing. Because I knew, with absolute certainty, that I'd never been there before. But I also knew, somehow, that part of me had always been there. Part of me belonged there. I ran. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, crashing through underbrush, following my GPS back toward the main trail, not caring about the branches tearing at my clothes or the rocks cutting through my hiking boots. But no matter how fast I ran, I could hear them behind me. Not footsteps, something worse. The sound of air moving around large bodies, the whisper of fabric or skin brushing against tree branches, and underneath it all, that same horrible chorus of voices calling my name. I made it back to my truck as full darkness fell, and I drove straight home without stopping, without looking back, without even checking my mirrors. But when I got to my apartment and looked at my gear, I found something that shouldn't have been there. The camera. Emily's camera was in my backpack, even though I know I never picked it up, and it was still recording. The next morning, I tried to forget everything that happened. I told myself it was altitude sickness, dehydration, maybe some kind of psychological break from the stress of the search and rescue mission. I put the camera in a drawer and tried to move on with my life. But the dreams started that very night. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that clearing. But in the dreams, I wasn't alone. All the missing people were there. Grant, Emily, dozens of others I didn't recognize. They were sitting in their circles of stones, perfectly preserved, perfectly still, all facing that ring of 7 trees. And they were all smiling that same terrible smile I'd seen on Grant's face. But the worst part was that in the dreams, I was smiling too. I tried to research what I'd seen. I spent weeks going through missing 411 cases, indigenous legends, geological surveys, anything that might explain what was happening in those mountains. What I found was a pattern going back over a century. People disappearing in that exact area, always experienced hikers, always under impossible circumstances. Search parties finding evidence that didn't make sense. Clothes folded neatly, personal items arranged in precise patterns, footprints that led nowhere. And in almost every case, there were reports from other hikers of hearing voices calling their names, of seeing figures moving between the trees, of feeling an overwhelming compulsion to leave the established trails and walk deeper into the wilderness. The local Blackfeet Nation has stories about that area too, stories they don't like to share with outsiders. But I found an elderly tribal member, William Running Wolf, who was willing to talk. He told me about the Watchers, ancient spirits that guard the boundary between the world of the living and something else, something hungry. He said the mountains have always taken people, but only those who were already marked, already chosen. The Watchers don't hunt, he told me. They wait. And when someone stumbles into their territory, someone who carries the right kind of loneliness, the right kind of pain, they offer a choice. You can fight it and die afraid, or you can accept it and become part of something larger than yourself. I asked him how someone would know if they'd been marked. He looked at me with eyes that seemed to see right through my skull and said, "You already know." That night, I checked the camera again. The recording had advanced. Somehow, impossible as it sounds, the footage now showed me in that clearing, standing exactly where I'd stood, at the exact time I'd been there. But in the video, I wasn't alone. The preserved figures were all looking at me, their heads turned in perfect unison, and one of them, Emily, was holding up her hand in what looked like a greeting. And at the very end of the new footage, just before it cut to black again, I could see my own mouth moving, forming words I didn't remember speaking. I understand now. I'm ready. I deleted the files. I threw the camera in a dumpster behind a gas station on the outskirts of town. I put in for a transfer to a different Park Service office, packed my apartment, and left Whitefish without telling anyone where I was going. But it didn't matter, because the dreams followed me. The whispers followed me, and no matter where I went, I could feel them watching, waiting for me to make the choice I knew I'd eventually have to make. 2 weeks ago, I received a package with no return address. Inside was Emily's camera, along with a printed photo I'd never seen before. It showed the 7-tree clearing, but this time, all the preserved figures were standing, facing the camera. And there, in the center of the group, was an empty space exactly my size. On the back of the photo, written in what looked like my own handwriting, were the words, "It's time to come home." I tried to throw the photo away. I burned it, actually, watched it curl and blacken in my kitchen sink. But when I woke up the next morning, it was on my nightstand again, pristine and untouched. I know what's going to happen. I know because I can feel it building inside me like pressure before a storm. The voices are getting louder, more insistent. The dreams are lasting longer. And every morning when I look in the mirror, my reflection looks a little more like those preserved figures in the clearing. Still living, still breathing, but somehow separate from the world around me. Tomorrow, I'm driving back to Glacier. I'm going to hike that trail one more time, follow those footprints to their source, and make the choice I've been avoiding for 3 months. Maybe I'll fight it. Maybe I'll find a way to break free from whatever hold they have on me. But probably not. Probably I'll take my place in that circle of stones, add my belongings to that twisted gallery of the taken, and wait for the next lost soul to stumble into our territory. Wait to offer them the same choice I was given: die afraid and alone, or become part of something ancient and patient and eternally watching. If you live in Montana, if you hike the backcountry around Glacier, if you've ever felt like you were being watched in those deep woods, trust that feeling. Turn around. Get back to the main trails. Don't follow voices that call your name. Don't investigate sounds that seem out of place. And for God's sake, don't let curiosity lead you into clearings that don't appear on any map. Because once you see those 7 trees, once you understand what the Watchers are offering, there's no going back. The choice becomes inevitable. Just a matter of when, not if. And if you're watching this video late at night, alone in your room, and you hear something calling your name from outside, well, maybe you've already been marked too. Maybe we'll see each other soon, in that place between the world of the living and whatever comes next. I hope I'm wrong about all of this. I hope tomorrow I'll find that clearing empty, those cameras finally silent, those ancient agreements finally broken. But hope is just another kind of hunger, isn't it? And the mountains are always feeding. Like and subscribe if you made it through.
I need you to listen to this, all of it. Because if you're planning to visit Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, if you've seen those viral TikToks about the mummies they found down there, if you've read about Floyd Collins getting trapped 100 years ago, you need to know what's really waiting in the darkness below Bowling Green. My name is Sarah Martinez, and until 3 weeks ago, I was a cave photographer working with the National Park Service. If you're local to Kentucky, if you've ever been on the Echo River tour, please comment below. Tell me if you've heard what I heard. Hit that subscribe button because the Park Service will never tell you this story, and after tonight, I might not be able to tell it either. It started with room 237. That's what we called it. Not its official designation, just our nickname for a chamber that doesn't appear on any public map. It's accessed through a maintenance tunnel behind the tourist areas, about half a mile past where the Echo River tour ends. The Park Service has known about it since the 1970s, but they've kept it classified because of what's inside. Not Native American artifacts, not geological formations, something else. I was documenting unexplored sections for a new research publication when my supervisor, Dr. Chen, handed me coordinates to room 237. Just get some basic shots, he said, avoiding eye contact. Document the rock formations and come back. Don't spend more than 30 minutes down there. When I asked why, he looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before, like he was afraid of his own words. Because after 30 minutes, you start to hear them calling back. The descent to room 237 takes you through passages that get narrower and more twisted as you go deeper. My headlamp beam barely penetrated the darkness ahead, and the silence was so complete I could hear my heartbeat echoing off the limestone walls. The air tasted different down there, not just humid cave air, but something metallic and old, like blood mixed with century-old dust. When I finally reached room 237, I understood why it wasn't on the tourist maps. The chamber was massive, cathedral-sized, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into blackness above my head, but covering every surface, carved deep into the limestone walls, were thousands of names. Not Native American petroglyphs, not historical graffiti. Names in modern English carved in dozens of different handwriting styles, some fresh enough that limestone dust still clung to the letters. Sarah Chen, Michael Rodriguez, Jennifer Walsh, David Kim, all the missing people from the past 30 years. Every unexplained disappearance from the Mammoth Cave area was represented on those walls, carved by their own hands before they vanished forever. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that, as I stood there with my camera, trying to document what I was seeing, I heard my own voice calling out from somewhere deep in the chamber. Hello? Is someone there? I'm lost and need help getting back to the surface. It was my exact voice, with my accent, my speech patterns, but I was standing completely silent with my mouth closed. And as I listened, frozen with terror, I realized the voice was coming from multiple directions. Dozens of versions of my own voice, overlapping and echoing, all calling out the same desperate plea for help. That's when I understood. Every name carved into those walls, every missing person, they were still down there, trapped in the limestone somehow, calling out to lure the next person deeper into the cave system. And now they had my voice too. I tried to run, but the moment I turned toward the exit tunnel, every voice in the chamber changed. Now they were all calling my name. Sarah! Sarah, don't leave us. Sarah, we know the way out. Just follow our voices and we'll show you. But they were coming from the wrong direction. The voices were calling from deeper in the cave, away from the exit, down passages that plunged into the earth like throats. And even though I knew it was impossible, even though every rational part of my brain was screaming warnings, those voices sounded so real, so desperate and human. How could I ignore people crying out for help? I took one step toward the voices before I caught myself. That's when I saw the fresh carving tools scattered on the chamber floor, chisels and hammers that hadn't been there when I entered. And beside them, a half-finished carving that made my blood freeze. Sarah Martinez carved in my own handwriting, even though I'd never touched those tools. The voices got more insistent. Sarah, we can see the exit. We can see sunlight. Just come toward our voices and follow us home. But underneath their words, I could hear something else. A sound like stone grinding against stone, like the cave itself was moving and shifting around me. I forced myself to turn away from the voices and run toward the real exit. Behind me, the calling turned to screaming. Not angry screaming, but the desperate screams of people being abandoned to die. Every step I took, those voices followed me through the tunnels, begging me to come back, promising they could show me secret passages, swearing they were real people who just needed help. Do you know what the cruelest part was? Some of those voices probably were real people, at least at first. People who got lost in the unmapped sections and called out until their voices became part of the cave's collection, part of its hunting method. I made it back to the surface, but something followed me up. For the past 3 weeks, I've been hearing my own voice calling from impossible places, from my apartment walls, from storm drains, from the basement of my workplace. Always the same desperate plea. Hello? Is someone there? I'm lost and need help. And the worst part is, I keep wanting to answer. I keep wanting to call back and help that lost version of myself. Because what if she's real? What if there's actually a version of me still trapped down there, and I'm the only one who can save her? I've tried staying in hotels, I've tried leaving Kentucky entirely, but wherever I go, I hear that voice calling from underground. My voice begging someone to come down and help her find the way back to the surface. The Park Service fired me yesterday. They said I was compromised by prolonged cave exposure and that I needed psychological evaluation. But I know the truth. They fired me because I was asking too many questions about room 237, about why they keep it off the maps, about how many people have gone missing after documented visits to that chamber. They know what's down there. They've always known. And now it has my voice to add to its collection. If you're reading this, if you live anywhere near Mammoth Cave, please listen to me. If you hear someone calling for help from storm drains or basements or anywhere that connects to the underground, don't answer. Don't try to help. Because the thing in room 237 doesn't just collect voices, it collects the people attached to those voices. And if you hear a woman with a slight Spanish accent calling out for help, saying she's lost and needs someone to guide her back to the surface, that's me, or what's left of me. Don't come looking. Don't try to save me. Because I'm starting to remember carving my name into those limestone walls, and I don't think I ever made it back to the surface at all. Like and subscribe if you made it through.
I never should have gone back to Forest Grove. But 3 weeks ago, I heard the sound again. And now I can't stop thinking about what we really found out there in 2016. What we covered up. What's coming back. You probably heard about the Forest Grove sound if you were online 9 years ago. Small Oregon town, mysterious noise, people going crazy trying to find the source. The media made it seem cute, like some quirky Pacific Northwest mystery. They said it stopped on its own. They said it was probably just a broken air conditioner. They lied. If you've never been to Forest Grove, it sits right at the edge of everything. Portland's sprawl reaches out like fingers through the valley, and Forest Grove is the last knuckle before the wild country begins. Past Gales Creek Road, where most people heard the sound, there's nothing but logging cuts and deer trails and the kind of deep forest silence that makes you understand why people used to believe in things that lived in the woods. I was a senior at Pacific University when it started. February 15th, 2016. I remember the exact date because it was the night before my organic chemistry midterm, and I was cramming in the library when my phone started buzzing. Text after text. Do you hear that? What the hell is that noise? Something's wrong in town. By the time I got outside, half the campus was standing in the quad, looking up at the sky like we expected to see something. The sound was... God, how do you describe it? Like a giant tuning fork struck somewhere in the darkness. A single, pure note that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. It made your teeth ache, made your chest tight, made you want to run, but you couldn't tell which direction to run to get away from it. But here's what nobody talked about afterward. What didn't make it into any of those news stories. The sound wasn't just a sound. There was something underneath it, something you felt more than heard. A pulse, a rhythm, like a heartbeat, but wrong. Too slow, then too fast. Like whatever was making it was learning how heartbeats were supposed to work. Please, if you're from Forest Grove, if you were there in 2016, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you remember. Because I'm starting to think some of us heard more than we admitted, even to ourselves. The official story says the sound lasted about 2 weeks. That's not true. It lasted exactly 13 days, and I know because I was part of the group that tracked it. 7 of us from the physics program, led by this grad student named Marcus, who had all kinds of recording equipment. We called ourselves the Sound Hunters, thinking we were so clever, so scientific. We were going to solve the mystery, maybe get our 15 minutes of fame. Marcus set up monitoring stations all around town. Gales Creek Road, the old mill site, 3 spots on campus, even one out past the Clear Creek Reservoir. What we found should have been impossible. The sound wasn't coming from any single location. It was coming from all of them, simultaneously, but the frequency was different at each spot. Like something was broadcasting on multiple channels at once, creating a harmony that shouldn't exist. On day 3, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. When he analyzed the recordings, he found something embedded in the sound, a pattern repeating every 47.3 seconds. It wasn't random electrical interference. It was structured, intentional. It was trying to communicate. That's when Sarah joined us. Sarah Hendricks, a linguistics major who'd been following our posts on the university forum. She was small and quiet, with these intense green eyes that seemed to see things the rest of us missed. When Marcus played her the pattern isolated from the background sound, she went completely still for almost a minute. "It's not human," she whispered finally. "But it's not random either. There's syntax here, grammar. It's learning our language structure and trying to match it." Learning. That word still gives me chills. Have any of you ever heard something trying to learn how to speak? Have you ever felt like something was studying you while you slept? Because that's what the next week was like. The sound got more complex every night, started incorporating new tones, new rhythms, and some of us, the ones who spent the most time listening, trying to decode it, we started having the dreams. The dreams were always the same. You're walking through the forest past Gales Creek, following deer trails that somehow feel familiar even though you've never been on them before. The trees get thicker, older, until the canopy blocks out the sky and you're moving through green twilight. And then you reach the clearing. In the center of the clearing is a hole, not a cave, a hole, perfectly round, going straight down into the earth like someone took a giant drill bit to the world. The edges are smooth, almost polished, and when you look down into it, you can see your own face reflected back from somewhere impossibly deep. But your reflection is wrong. Its mouth is moving, making shapes, trying to speak, but no sound comes out. Then you hear the sound rising up from the hole, and you understand that your reflection has been practicing, learning, waiting for the day it can climb out and take your place, speaking with your voice, wearing your face, but serving something else entirely. I know this sounds insane. I know how it sounds. But all 7 of us in the Sound Hunters group had the same dream, every single night for a week, and we weren't the only ones. On day 9, people started disappearing. Not dramatically. Small-town disappearances never are. Jessica Moreau, who worked at the campus bookstore, just didn't show up for her shift. Her roommate said she'd gone for a walk the night before and never came back. Then it was Dave Kowalski from the hardware store. His wife found his truck parked at the end of Gales Creek Road, keys still in the ignition, but no sign of Dave. The police started a search, but here's the thing about searching for someone in the Oregon Coast Range. There are thousands of square miles of forest out there. Deep forest, old forest, the kind where you can walk 20 feet off a trail and lose it forever. They found Dave's footprints leading into the woods, but after about 100 yards, the trail just stopped, like he'd walked into the air. By day 11, we'd lost 8 people. All of them had been part of the groups actively searching for the sound source. All of them had been experiencing the dreams. And Marcus was starting to change. I noticed it first when we met at his apartment to review the latest recordings. He kept tilting his head when he listened to the sound, like he was trying to catch some frequency the rest of us couldn't hear. His eyes had gotten darker, more distant, and when he spoke, there were these little pauses between words, like he was translating thoughts from some other language. "I think I know what it wants," he said that night, his voice flat and strange. "It's not trying to communicate with us, it's trying to become us, one by one, until there's enough of them to make the crossing." "The crossing?" Sarah asked, but Marcus just stared at the wall and didn't answer. That was the last time I saw Marcus as Marcus. Look, I need you to understand something. If you're watching this video because you're curious about paranormal mysteries, because you like being scared, please stop now. Click on something else. Watch cat videos. Go live your life. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't entertainment. It's a warning, and if you're from anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, if you live near old-growth forest, if you've ever heard sounds in the night that didn't quite make sense, you need to know what's out there. The sound stopped on day 13. Just like that, complete silence. The media declared the mystery solved, probably a faulty compressor somewhere. Case closed. The university sent out a statement saying their physics team had collaborated with experts to identify the most likely cause, and everyone seemed relieved to have a boring explanation. But 4 of the sound hunters never came home, including Marcus. We found Marcus 3 days later, about a mile into the woods past Gales Creek. He was standing in a small clearing, completely motionless, facing a Douglas fir that had to be at least 200 years old. When we called his name, he turned toward us, and that's when I knew. His eyes were wrong, still brown, still the same shape, but the intelligence behind them was alien, ancient, patient in a way human intelligence never is. And when he smiled, I saw that his teeth had changed. They were sharper, more pointed, like someone had filed them down to make room for something else. "The sound worked," he said, but it wasn't Marcus's voice. It was the same pitch, the same timbre, but the rhythm was off, like someone playing a recording at the wrong speed. We've been calling for so long, and finally someone answered. Finally someone listened. That's when I ran. Left Sarah and the others standing there and crashed through the underbrush toward the road like a coward. I could hear them shouting behind me, and then screaming, and then nothing at all. Just the normal forest sounds. Birds, wind in the trees, the distant rush of Gales Creek. I made it back to town, called the police, led them to the spot where we'd found Marcus. But the clearing was empty. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, nothing. Just that ancient Douglas fir and the kind of deep forest silence that felt like being watched. The official report said the missing students had probably gotten lost in the woods and fallen into one of the old mining shafts. Case closed. The families held memorial services. Life went on. But I knew the truth. Something had been calling to us through the sound. Something old and patient and hungry. And now it had what it needed. 4 human templates, 4 sets of memories and mannerisms and speech patterns to practice with. 4 perfect disguises for the next phase of whatever plan it had been working on for centuries. I left Forest Grove the day after graduation, moved to California, tried to forget, got a job, got married, had a normal life for 9 years. I almost convinced myself it had all been some kind of shared psychotic episode. Stress from finals week combined with mass hysteria. Almost. 3 weeks ago, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Just 4 words. The sound is back. I drove up to Forest Grove last weekend, told my wife it was a college reunion, parked on Gales Creek Road and walked into the woods, following trails that felt familiar, even though I'd sworn I'd never go back there. The forest was different, quieter, more watchful, and deep in the trees, so faint I might have imagined it, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Voices, human voices, calling to each other through the darkness, but the words were wrong. The rhythm was off, like people who'd learned to speak by listening to recordings, and I recognized one of them. Marcus, or something wearing Marcus's voice, still out there after 9 years, still practicing. I ran back to my car, drove straight home without stopping, but I can't stop thinking about what I heard, what it means. Because if they're still there, still learning, still growing stronger, what happens when they decide they're ready? What happens when they've perfected their disguises and start walking back into town? I've been researching, trying to find other cases like Forest Grove, and I found them. Taos, New Mexico, with their mysterious hum that's been going on for decades. Windsor, Ontario, with their industrial drone that nobody can quite locate. Tiny towns across the country where strange sounds appear for weeks or months, drawing attention, attracting listeners, then suddenly stop. And in every case, people go missing. Not many, just enough to provide the templates, the personalities, the human masks for whatever's been waiting in the deep places of the world. What if the forest grove sound wasn't unique? What if it was just one note in a larger symphony, a coordinated effort happening all across the country? What if something has been systematically studying us, learning us, preparing to replace us one small town at a time? I don't know how to stop it. I don't know if it can be stopped, but I know it's still happening. Right now, somewhere, there's a town just like Forest Grove where people are lying in bed, listening to sounds they can't explain, having dreams of holes in the ground and reflections that move on their own. If that's your town, please, don't go looking for the source. Don't try to record it or analyze it or decode it. Don't be like us. Don't listen too closely, because it's listening back. And once it hears you, really hears you, you become part of its collection, part of its plan. And if you see someone you know acting just a little bit different, speaking just a little bit wrong, smiling with teeth that seem too sharp, run. Don't try to help them. Don't try to save them. Just run and hope it hasn't learned your voice yet. The sound is spreading, and it's getting better at being human. Like and subscribe if you made it through.